Hey folks, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our retro throwback look at the Excalibur Logic Wizard. This was released in the early 2000s when pocket consoles and gaming consoles were extremely popular, and so this was meant as a very low-cost option, except it didn't support game cartridges, so all your games that came here by default were the ones that you could play. So of course this isn't anything new. We've seen this quite a few times by other Excalibur products, which were typically low-cost and they didn't work too well, but they offered a sub $30 experience for kids to perhaps play a very basic 8-bit style game on a monochrome screen. But what makes this version a little bit more interesting is it's really meant more for practicing memory as well as for practicing your logic skills. So it had more of an educational quality to it than some of their other, let's say, Tetris, almost rip-off games, PMPs, and so on and so forth. So taking a quick look at the design here, again, you have access to controls on the left here to 4 up, down, left, right keys, a monochromatic screen here, which is in black and white. There's no backlight. Down below here, there's access to a mono speaker, as well as a power on-off switch, a sound key that you can turn to mute the sound on here. There's also a clear key and enter key to enter into a specific game, as well as a control set on the right for you to enter numbers. All in all, it's made out of plastic, and for 30 bucks, the plastic here is decent. It doesn't feel overly cheap, which is nice. And size-wise, if you want to compare it with something a bit more modern, here it is next to a phone with a 3.5/4 inch display, so you get a pretty good idea there. So taking a quick look at the boot up sequence here. So yeah, there's this rather annoying sound when it first boots up, but of course you can mute that if you want to, and later on you can then cycle back and forth between the various games that's offered on here. So for instance, you have access to things that, access to almost a Bejeweled type game that's a little bit of an imitation there, but allows you to swap these similarly shaped and similar styled icons for you to eliminate these rows and of course try and clear. So let's go through some of these games in a bit more detail. Starting with this dice game, it allows you to think and visualize in 3D space, what sides should be where. So for instance, if I press on enter here, it starts up this game 3, 2, 1. And then it shows you really quickly, what the dice looks like. And what you have to do is move this dice to the black square with the correct kind of number printed on the top. So we have a 1 there. So I have to move this, and then of course if I move it left, right, up, and down, that's going to change what's displayed on the very top of the dice. And so no matter what I do, I have to try and match it so I get a 1 and also land on the particular icon there. So it challenges you again to think about 3D space and of course kind of memorize the sides as well as what will happen if you move a dice a particular way. It's a pretty challenging as well as a fun way to interact, I guess, with a limited screen as well as a limited controls on this budget console. So a decent game here. If you're done with it, you press on clear for a few seconds longer to exit out of that game. The next one here, again, if there's a Tic Tac Toe, which is I think pretty self-explanatory. Same thing with Connect 4. Those are all pretty basic, I think. If you want to take a quick look, for instance, at Connect 4, at how the computer works, there's not really too much things you can change as far as game difficulty. So unfortunately, it seems to be locked down in that sense. And you are starting off as, I'm seeing here, white. So if I want to tap on this and say enter, it's going to drop that down. The computer is pretty fast to respond, so not bad. And then, of course, it's going to try to block me there. And then I can move, again, left and right to create different spaces, as well as get my piece down in the correct spot. So a pretty fun way to also interact with a very limited hardware here on this console. So clear, let's get out of that. Next thing here, a few more math and number-based games, a bit more of a memory-based games in terms of remembering the shapes that you see. Same thing here, this is kind of a maze where you remove different lines so that eventually you want the car to get to the house correctly. Of course, for a more detailed description of all these games, you could have checked out the user manual, which was documented in paper back then. This one here, a bit more challenging. It fills up a certain water with a certain a beaker or a vase with a amount of water, and then shows you the amount here. And afterwards, you have to use inference as well as deduction to realize, which of these containers, is this shape being referenced to. It's going to zoom in as well as zoom out, so it's actually a bit more challenging. This one might be one of the more challenging games on here from a logic perspective. But all in all, these are really not bad games, which I remember being surprised at when this thing was first released, since I really expected a kind of a crappy console from Excalibur, which didn't really have the greatest reputation, as well as their previous offerings were quite weak. Games that you kind of played for a few times and then discarded. But this thing here actually was a bit more fun to interact with just because of this whole logic-based theme. So thanks for watching this video look back here at OS Reviews. This has been the Excalibur Logic Wizard.